In this video, we're going to walk through all of the steps in order to make a working version of the Chatbot project. Before we get started, remember to look back at the project spec page. It's important before starting any project to look at the documentation that you have available and make sure that you can visualize all of the different components that you'll need to make in order to build a simple working version. The spec page also tells us to choose a theme for our bot, and I've chosen to build a mood bot. My chatbot is going to ask you what your mood is and then respond in a way that's appropriate based on whether you say you're happy or sad. So here I have the entirety of my chatbot program. And to make this a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is uncomment portions of the code as we get to them in the steps of the project. So let's start with step number 1. Step 1 says use print statements to greet the user and explain your chatbot theme. So the way that I started this project was by putting a comment at the top to explain what's going to be in this file. And that's a really good idea for any of the Python projects that you create. So here I have, this is a project, build your first chatbot. And to complete the first step, what we're going to do is come down to where I introduced my chatbot. So it says use print statements to greet the user and explain your chatbot theme. My chatbot is a mood bot, and I'm going to ask the user to tell if they're feeling happy or sad. It's also a really good practice to build your projects in testable iterations. And what that means is we're going to write a few lines of code at a time until you get something that should work. Rather than waiting until the end and building the entire chatbot and then seeing whether it's broken or not and having to fix all of the different errors, we're going to make sure that we debug it as we go, testing at each step. So here I am going to test and just make sure that Python is printing out what my mood bot is and what we're going to be asking the user. All right, let's look at step 2. We have get user input using the input function. So here, I used the input function that we learned in a previous module to ask the user, how are you feeling today? And again, we want to test each step as we go along to make sure it works. So let's just print out the user response that we get. This is called print debugging. So now, welcome to the mood bot. Please tell me if you're feeling happy or sad. How are you feeling today? And I'm going to make sure that if I'm feeling sad, okay, we got the user input and it printed it out. Now I can get rid of my print debugging statement and we can look at the next step. The next step is the long one. So we have create a function named getBotResponse. The function should take the parameter user response and return a string with the chatbot response. So this is kind of the main portion of our chatbot where we're going to be deciding what we want to respond. The step says the function should use at least 2 lists to store unique bot responses and use conditionals to decide which of the response lists to select a random choice from. For example, the user response happy could return a randomly chosen response from a list of happy replies, like yay. Let's start by defining our actual function. So it said create a function named getBot with the parameter user response. And I'm going to add a comment before my function to say what it's going to do. Take the parameter user response and return a string with the chatbot's reply. So what do we want our responses to be? I'm creating a mood bot and I want to respond to whether or not the user is happy or sad. So I could create 2 lists. Bot response happy with yay, that's awesome. And bot response sad with something like that's too bad or I'm sorry to hear that. Now that we have our responses, we need to decide which response to give when. And when our code needs to decide which of a path to take, we can use conditionals, like an if-else statement. So let's start with this if-else statement here. And what we're going to do is we're going to check our input user response and see if the response was happy or if the response was sad. The step says that we should choose a random response from the list. And you'll remember that we worked on using external libraries like random in order to make a choice. So let's import that library. We have from random, we're going to import the choice function, and then we can use the choice function to choose a random response out of the items in our list. And we'll return a random response from the happy list if our user says they're happy, or a random response from the sad list if the user says that they're sad. Okay, we just wrote quite a bit of code, so let's test it and make sure that it's working in the way that we would expect. We can call our function using the user response input that we got earlier and print out the bot response in order to see that it's working properly. So let's run this. Oops. So here I got an indentation error, which means that I didn't indent my code properly. It's in one more level than Python expected. So now let's try to fix that and try it again. Perfect. Okay. So here we're printing out welcome to the mood bot, asking how the user is feeling, and then we're going to take their response and feed it through our function to see what response we get. Okay, so let's say that I'm feeling happy. Yay, we got a random choice out of the happy responses list. That's awesome. Let's say I'm feeling sad. Random choice out of the sad responses. What happens though if our user inputs something that the chatbot doesn't know about? Maybe a different feeling, or they ask it something else altogether. Let's say, what are elephants? We get a none response. And that's because our function isn't actually returning anything if the user doesn't say happy or sad. So to handle that, let's add an else statement. And if the user enters something that the bot doesn't understand, we'll return, I didn't understand that. And we can test that. Let's say I'm feeling meh. And now the bot says that it didn't understand that. All right, so now we have most of the functionality of our bot in place. We can respond to the user, whether they say they're happy, they're sad, or if they input something that we don't understand. The last step, step 4, says use a while loop to keep running your chatbot until the user enters done. We learned in the while loops topic that we can actually create infinite while loops that will run over and over again for things like a chatbot or a game. So let's try that here. We're going to uncomment this while loop. And now I'm going to put the indentation back to put all of our chatbot code into the while loop. So now we have this while true. We're going to loop infinitely. And every time the while loop goes into another iteration, we're going to ask the user for their response and then reply with the chatbot. So let's see how that works. All right, I can say I'm feeling happy, I can say I'm feeling sad, and I can say penguins. And the chatbot will respond to whatever input that you give it. The last part of this step says that we should keep the chatbot running until the user enters done. We want a way for the user to exit out of the chatbot program if they're done with it without completely shutting down the code. So let's find a way to exit gracefully here. When we use infinite while loops in Python, we can use an if statement and the keyword break to exit our while loop when we've met a certain condition. So here our condition is that the user responded done. If the user responds done, we'll break the while loop, and that will be the end of our program, so it will exit. Let's try this out one more time and test to make sure everything is working. All right, welcome to the mood bot. How are you feeling today? I can be happy. I can be sad, and our chatbot will continue to reply until we enter the word done. So here we have a working version of the chatbot program. I hope you're enjoying making your own, and make sure that you share your own chatbot with all of the other students and see what everyone else's themes are.